when power forgets its purpose. And it seems a lot of that has been going on lately to a degree that we no longer can just accept it. But let's take a look at power. The capacity or ability to direct or the behavior of others or the course of events. Political or social authority or control, especially that exercised by the government. Now, let's take a look at control, the power to influence or direct people's behavior or course of events. Ask yourself how much power and control our community has. And the only time we get a chance to exercise it is in our own community. And that's after work, or you've been already misused by the judicial system. And so therefore you come to the community with not a positive attitude, but angry. And you talk about what you control in these several blocks. But what about true control? To a point, our community does have control over where we spend our money. $1 trillion leads to a lot of spending power and a bit of control if used wisely and we vote in a block as a community. But we have not been doing that, and so therefore we exercise little control of power. So I want to talk to you today about power, not the loud kind, not the obvious kind, but the quiet, everyday power we give to people because society cannot function without trust. We give the power to police officers, to officials, to institutions, and we do it with the understanding that power exists to protect, not to dominate, to serve, not to punish, to intervene when real harm is manufactured against us, not to manufacture it when obedience is expected. When that understanding breaks, the consequences are not theoretical. They are personal. They land in parking lots, on sidewalks, or in living rooms. The story begins one ordinary morning. A woman running her usual route, 2 dogs at her side, no urgency, no threat, no chaos, and then suddenly authority appears. Not to help, not to respond to harm, but to control. 2 police officers block the path. Their cars converge. A claim is made against aggressive dogs, but the dogs are leashed, calm, and under control. In fact, she's military, a veteran, and these are actually military dogs who served in the service along with her. Now, what follows is not an investigation. It is not a conversation. It is a test, a demand to comply without explanation, a refusal to acknowledge credentials, experience, or law, a strategic closing of space. What misuse of power looks like in real time. Not violence yet, not shouting, just the quiet assumption that authority alone is enough. And when power is misused, it rarely announces itself. It presents itself as procedure, as routine, just doing my job, ma'am. But intent matters. And when an officer steps forward not to resolve a situation, but to corner someone, that is not protection. When documentation is ignored because compliance is easier, that is not safety. When fear is leveraged as a tactic, that is not law enforcement. That morning escalation didn't come from the citizen, it came from authority. Here is the part we don't talk about enough. Most abuses of power rely on one assumption, that the person on the receiving end will back down, that they will shrink, that they will surrender their rights quietly to avoid conflict. And when that doesn't happen, the system often responds not with reflection, but with retaliation. And we all know that to be the truth, especially in the community that I come from. Lawsuits, threats, policy changes written in back rooms, that is what happens next. An attempt to destroy what could not be controlled. An attempt to redefine danger so it could be weaponized. An attempt to punish resistance itself. This is how systems fail. Not all at once, but through a series of small decisions made by small people who believe power entitles them to obedience. And here is the uncomfortable truth. See, I know this to be a fact. If you were in the military, you know how powerful you felt when you got an M16. You put on that military gear, and you understand that the average person does not have what you have. That empowers you. And that leads to misuse of power that doesn't require bad laws. It requires unchecked discretion. It thrives when silence feels safer than speaking, when people assume someone else will step in. When someone does, in this case, it wasn't just one person. It was neighbors. It was witnesses. It was attorneys. It was a system being forced, finally, to confront itself because people didn't look away. They kept records. They videotaped. And they followed facts instead of narratives. Accountability did not come because power corrected itself. It came because power was challenged. And that distinction matters because if we tell ourselves this was an anomaly, we missed the lesson. And the lesson is following up with an investigation, not a conversation. Okay? The lesson is the demand to comply without explanation can yet be no more. The lesson is not about one officer. It is about what happens when authority is allowed to drift away from its purpose. Power without accountability does not stay neutral. It moves toward self-protection, toward punishment, toward control. And the people who suffer first are rarely those who are doing harm, but those who refuse to submit to harm quietly. The question is not whether power will be misused. The question is whether we are prepared to recognize it when it is. Whether we believe citizens have the right to challenge authority. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will tell you this. We have to make a decision because we know that power unchecked will not correct itself, and we have not been challenging or seeking correction of power. This, what I read, was simply based on a legislator who was doing consulting for a company who wanted to take over the training of police dogs and other type of duties, and the contract was worth $2,300,000. So instead of letting this lady, who's trained in the military to do that, and have this contract, they were trying to actually scare her from her money making. But it didn't work. And it's only because of people like us.